Шановні колеги, будемо продовжувати роботу. До слова запрошується...
Dear colleagues, we continue our day. So the floor is given to Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE SMM.
Dear friends, the OSCE SMM monitors and reports facts. In a highly politicized and contentious environment, there is a need for balance, truth, and objectivity. When the sides to a conflict exchange only missiles, bullets, and angry, distorted words, there is a need for facts. As the end of the year festivities approach, there is a tendency to see the world as we would like it to be. This is for many people, after all, a time of hope and goodwill. Last week, like throughout most of 2016, the OSCE SMM, however, recorded some very uncomfortable facts. Fact number one, last week, the OSCE SMM recorded a 75% increase in the number of ceasefire violations compared to the previous week. Fact number two, the increase in the use of Minsk-proscribed weapons was particularly pronounced by approximately 300%, in fact. Fact number three, last week our monitors recorded at least 985 mortar, tank, artillery and multiple launch rocket systems explosions. The previous week they have recorded 242. These proscribed weapons were fired by men in uniform, despite the fact that men in suits a long time ago agreed to withdraw these weapons. And when I saw that they agreed, and when I say they have agreed, I mean these men in suits signed their names on the Minsk Memorandum and to a subsequent implementation package and two addendums. Fact number four. The vast majority of these explosions, 843, were recorded over the weekend in areas south and southeast of Svetlodarsk. Fact number five. This hotspot accounted for half of all ceasefire violations throughout the security zone. Dear friends, behind these dry facts lies a massive upsurge in violence. Its intensity can be judged by what our monitors in government-controlled Svetlodarsk observed on Sunday. In just over 6 hours, they heard 700 explosions, 680 assessed as outgoing 120mm artillery rounds and 20 outgoing tank rounds. In nearby so-called DPR-controlled Debaltseve, other SMM monitors on Saturday night heard what they assessed as 12 outgoing multiple launch rocket system rounds. The next day they heard an approximately 43 outgoing MLRS rounds, as well as 1,900 undetermined explosions. The violence continues unabated in the Svetlodarsk-Debaltseve area. Just yesterday, our monitors there recorded over 1,100 explosions. As a result, our patrols have been forced back on a number of occasions, and as such, we are still unsure of what is happening there. The intense fighting there, which by all accounts has involved multiple casualties, underlies yet again the volatility on the ground. We had in the previous week recorded only 15 mortar explosions in that sector. The Avdiivka-Yasinovata-Donetsk airport triangle accounted for the bulk of the remaining violence last week, constituting a quarter of all ceasefire violations. It was particularly violent in that area on Friday night. From Donetsk city center, our monitors heard 504 explosions 6 to 10 kilometers northwest. The remaining quarter of all ceasefire violations recorded by the SMM occurred in areas east and northeast of Mariupol, the western outskirts of Horlivka, the western Luhansk region, and in the western and southwestern outskirts of Donetsk city. The latter location is particularly worrying, with 7% of ceasefire violations recorded there. The violence was the worst we have seen in that area since August. The violence we are now witnessing is not new. With the exception of 1st September, we have not had a single day in which we have not recorded ceasefire violations. Now listen careful. We have in fact throughout the year recorded over 300,000 ceasefire violations. Many of these ceasefire violations involve the use of Minsk-proscribed weapons, namely artillery pieces, mortar, tanks, and multiple launch rocket systems. Even though the sides have agreed to pull these weapons back beyond agreed withdrawal lines, we have this year spotted, now listen careful, over 3,000 such weapons within the withdrawal lines. Dear friends, much of the violence we see in Donbass is taking place in and around urban areas. We literally see thousands of explosive rounds being fired in these areas, which makes it inevitable that civilians are getting caught up in the violence. On Monday, our monitors were in government-controlled Luhansk. They saw a fresh crater caused by either an artillery or mortar round just 150 meters from a kindergarten. One of the kindergarten's windows was completely blown out. While they were in the town, our monitors heard two 120mm mortar rounds impacting just 500 meters away. A week before, other monitors of the SMM were in so-called DPR-controlled Zachanka. There, they noted a crater caused by a 122mm artillery round just 20 meters from a school. At the Mayorsk entry checkpoint last week, our monitors were on hand to see the ugly reality of this conflict. There they saw the body of a man in the snow. He had been shot in the head a few hours earlier. Fact number 6. From January to November this year, the OSCE SMM recorded 83 civilian deaths and 305 cases of civilian injuries. 4 of those fatalities were at the Olenivka entry-exit checkpoint in April, when artillery shells struck in the early morning hours as unsuspecting people slept, waiting for the checkpoint to open. Dear friends, there are only 5 points along the almost 500-kilometer long contact line where civilians can cross. More need to be established, and they should be open 24/7. In the meantime, is it too much to ask, at the minimum, that the sides disengage from the 5 current entry-exit checkpoints? At least 25,000 people cross every day at these locations. There is an urgent need to remove weapons and personnel immediately. I'm not asking for anything that the sides have not already agreed to do. The Minsk Memorandum, which the sides signed, stipulates the creation of a security zone all along the contact line, including at those 5 entry-exit checkpoints. This security zone is supposed to be a place where people have security. When those 4 people were killed in Olenivka in April, I thought the men in suits who make decisions would have acted to provide this security, to ensure there was no repetition. The latest death in Mayos clearly shows they have not done so. There are many misconceptions about disengagements, dear friends. But surely putting weapons and personnel beyond range of the other side, essentially creating the security zone they promised in the Minsk Memorandum, can only be a good thing. It is a brave step forward that must be taken now. In any case, the experience with disengagement so far show that whatever fears there may be are unfounded. Even with restricted access, and even though the SMM's consequent ability to monitor and verify disengagement had been curtailed, the SMM has still been able to verify that some hardware and personnel were pulled out of the Petriske and Solote disengagement areas. The verification we have provided is designed to allay any fears. Knowing that the other side has disengaged means knowing one's own disengagement will not be taken advantage of. The result has been an almost complete cessation of violence in these 2 disengagement areas. People living in those areas have finally come to some level of security. The disengagement process has been far from perfect, but it does demonstrate something important. When the sides are willing to take measures to create ceasefire conditions, they can. When orders are given, they are obeyed. What is missing is political will. What is missing is a prioritization of the protection of civilians. What is missing is an understanding of the needs of civilians. Last week in Donbass, I met many of those civilians. People on both sides of the contact line had one simple message. They want peace. The children I spoke to at the school in Oleksandrivka are like children anywhere else. But the fundamental difference is what they want for New Year. Kids elsewhere ask Santa for toys, dolls, and the latest gadgets, but in Oleksandrivka they had a different wish list for Santa. Here's a picture that we took at the school. It demonstrates a number of points. Firstly, children in Donbass are exposed to explosive remnants of war. These children are exposed not because they themselves are present, but because the explosive remnants of war are present. The remnants of anti-tank projectiles and shrapnel you see in these pictures are there because men in camouflage fired them in areas where these children live, play, and go to school. They are also there because other men in uniform subsequently failed to clear the area. Dear friends, this is not an academic issue. Children in Donbass die and are maimed because of explosive remnants of war. I imagine this Christmas will be in particular difficult for the parents of the 3 young brothers killed in Yannikieve on 4th of July when a grenade they were playing with exploded. Lest we forget, those boys were 11, 5, and 1.5 years old. The school children in Oleksandrivka also sent a powerful message. However inadvisable in turning explosive remnants of war into flower holders, they expressed an age-old desire, the desire for peace. These children are Ukrainians. They are the future of this country. Their interests must be considered, their voices must be heard, their wish list for Santa must be read. Fact number 7. Water supply to approximately 400,000 people in Avdiivka, Yasinovata and parts of Donetsk city are dependent on the water filtration plant in Yasinovata. Shelling and access problems for plant workers and repair crews threaten this supply. Fact number 8. 600,000 people in Luhansk region face power outages and heating problems because the sides have failed to come to an agreement to settle payment issues. Many of these people are children. Dear friends, many of the facts I presented here are indeed uncomfortable. I know, however, having been here for almost 3 years, that the people in this country are full of resilience. I know, and I expect, and all people all across Ukraine expect, that men in suits making decisions and will listen and will respond. People have more than an expectation. They have a right that their voices are heard, and although some of those voices are in areas temporarily not controlled by the government, they nonetheless are Ukrainians. They demand water, electricity and heating. They demand safe playgrounds. They demand schools free of violence. They demand that weapons are removed from their neighborhoods. They demand that these weapons not be fired on their homes. I also know that there is willingness to listen to the people of this country. We saw this with the sides agreeing to and at least partially implementing the framework decision on disengagement of forces and hardware. Dear friends, as 2016 comes to a close, I hope we can have fewer uncomfortable facts in the new year. The litany of violence and suffering must come to an end, and if people, and here I think of all the children of Donbass, if people are hurt, if their wish list to Santa is read, it can come to an end. As usual, at the end of my statement here, I would like to inform you about the latest mission numbers. As of today, the mission has 693 monitors, of whom 581 are deployed in the east. In addition, there are 324 Ukrainian colleagues and 97 other international staff working for the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Хук. Чи є запитання, шановні колеги? We don't have any questions at this point. The press conference is finished. Thank you for coming and looking forward to seeing you here next week.
Thank you.